My whole life, I was raised like a glass doll, delicate, polished, and always watched. My father built a world around me made of rules, silence, and fear to others. It looked like protection, but to me, it was a prison. I was his pride, his legacy, not for who I was but for what I represented, a spotless reputation, untouched virtue. An asset waiting to be traded. I didn't know what real freedom felt like. I only knew how to obey. How to keep my voice low, my gaze down, and my opinions buried under layers of politeness. I never questioned it until the day everything collapsed. It happened on a morning that felt like any other. The sun filtered in through the tall windows of our ancestral home, casting golden stripes across the marble floor I was sitting at. The vanity, brushing my hair into neat perfection when I heard the hesitant knock on my bedroom door. It wasn't the usual gentle tap from the housekeeper, it was urgent, shaky. When I opened the door, my father stood there, his face ghostly pale. His shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen, and that's when he said it. The words that shattered the illusion I'd been living in. You're getting married, Clara, we don't have a choice. I didn't understand, not right away. Married? To whom? Why? My father's empire, once powerful and respected, had crumbled beneath the weight of secret debts and failed investments, and in the rubble, I was the last card he had to play. His last lifeline. He didn't look at me like a daughter anymore, he looked at me like an offering. The man he owed money to was no ordinary businessman, he was someone people feared. A name whispered with caution. A man known not for his wealth alone, but for how he built it ruthlessly, without mercy. Justin Blackwood. I'd seen him only once on the glossy cover of a magazine that had since vanished from our coffee tables, a sharp-featured man with eyes like cold steel and the body of someone who knew control was his weapon. He was older, powerful, and untouchable. He wasn't the type of man you met. He was the type of man you were warned about, and now he was to be my husband, just like that. There was no proposal, no choice, no softness, only a date, a contract, and a dress I never picked. I watched myself in the mirror as the makeup artist painted my face into perfection. But the reflection felt foreign. My lips smiled, but my eyes were vacant. My heart felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. The ceremony was swift and sterile. No guests, no music, no warmth. I said yes without breathing. He signed the papers without looking at me. And when it was done, I was escorted into a sleek black car that waited like a hearse outside the courthouse. He didn't speak during the drive. He sat beside me like a wall of silence. Every movement he made was deliberate, calculated, dangerous. I tried not to look at him, but I felt him looking at me. Not like a husband, like a man examining something he now owned. When the car stopped in front of a towering mansion built of cold glass and stone, I didn't step out, I was pulled out. My heels clicked on the marble as I was led through massive doors and into the belly of a house that swallowed the light. Everything inside was shadowed and silent, the kind of silence that didn't welcome you, the kind that warned you. A maid appeared and silently guided me upstairs to a suite so large it could have been its own house. The walls were dark, the bed was massive, everything smelled expensive, cold, and unfamiliar. I stood there in my wedding dress, still clinging to my body like a veil of death, wondering what came next. I didn't have to wonder long. The door opened, and there he was, Justin Blackwood. No tuxedo, no ceremony smile, just rolled up sleeves and unbuttoned collar, and eyes that pinned me where I stood. He walked in like a man returning to something he already owned. His jacket landed on a chair, his tie loosened with one tug. When his eyes met mine, my stomach flipped, not with butterflies but with dread. I'd never seen a man like him up close, and now I was married to one. Did you really think you'd sleep alone tonight? He said, his voice low to calm, to certain. I stepped back, my body reacting faster than my mind. My back hit the wall behind me. I swallowed, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know what you expect of me. His smile was slow and terrifying. Everything, he said. You're my wife now, Clara, and I always take what's mine. I trembled, my dress felt heavier, tighter, my breath shallow. The air between us thickened as he stepped closer. I could smell him now, something dark and intoxicating. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run. But I didn't move. Are you a virgin? He asked so casually it made my skin crawl. I blinked, shame flushed my cheeks. I nodded. He stared for a long moment, and something in his gaze shifted, grew darker. Perfect, he murmured. And then, without waiting, he closed the space between us and kissed me hard, unforgiving and final. I froze, my hands trapped between our bodies, unsure whether to push him away or hold on. My mind screamed, but my body betrayed me. He rose up my skin, confusion boiling in my chest. He didn't ask, he didn't wait. He pulled me into him, and the world fell away. That night, I stopped being the girl my father raised, and I became something I didn't recognize. Not his possession, not Justin's property, but a storm of shame, confusion, and a terrible hunger. I didn't understand. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that he was forcing me. But in the spaces between his hands and my breathless cries, something darker bloomed. When it was over and the house fell into silence again, he pulled me against his chest and whispered in my ear, "You'll never be free again." And for the first time, I feared he was right. The morning light was thin and gray, struggling to break through the heavy velvet curtains that guarded the windows of my new prison. I lay in the massive bed, its silk sheets twisted around my legs like ghosts of the night before. My skin ached in places I didn't know could feel. My mind felt hollow. But my body remembered everything: his weight, his breath, the way he moved like a man who didn't believe in asking, only in taking. The silence in the room was unbearable. Like the aftermath of a thunderstorm that had ruined everything in its path, I sat up slowly, my hands trembling as I reached for the silk robe. Draped over the edge of the bed, every motion pulled a memory from my muscles, every breath carried his scent. It clung to me strong, unshakable. Like the taste of smoke after fire, I hated it. I hated how part of me didn't want to let it go. Wrapping the robe around myself, I tried to gather the broken pieces of who I used to be. But nothing fit right anymore. I wasn't the same Clara who had walked into this house. He wasn't there. The space beside me was cold and empty, but his presence hung in the air like a storm cloud. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt angry, but I just felt numb. My feet touched the cold marble floor and I stood up, the world around me spinning slightly. I made it halfway across the room before the door creaked open. Justin stood in the doorway like he owned the air I breathed. His shirt was black, pressed, impeccable. His dark hair was still damp and his gaze fell on me with that same unnerving calm. Like he could see straight through the silk and the shame, like he already knew I hadn't slept. That I hadn't stopped replaying the night in my head even once. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. His tone too casual, as if last night had been a game, a formality, a routine transaction. "No," I said flatly, folding my arms across my chest, trying to hide the way my skin still reacted to his presence. "How could I?" He smirked and stepped into the room, his eyes gliding down my body with deliberate slowness. "You looked very satisfied last night. You even called out my name." My cheeks burned with heat. "You forced me," I snapped, but the words felt thin, hollow, like even I didn't believe them anymore. His laugh was sharp and low, echoing through the room like a challenge. "Forced?" He moved closer. "You spread your legs for me, Clara, not once, several times. Don't lie to me, and more importantly, don't lie to yourself." I backed away instinctively. But he closed the distance effortlessly. His fingers brushed the inside of my wrist, a feather-light touch. My body shivered, traitorous again. I hated him. I hated myself more. "Stop," I whispered, but it came out broken, soft, like a plea I didn't know how to finish. "Why?" he asked, his hand finding my chin, lifting my face until our eyes locked. "You want it as much as I do. You just don't know how to ask for it. You don't know me," I said, my voice shaking. "You think I'm just something for you to use." He stared at me, his grip tightening. "I know you're my wife. I know you've never been touched by a man before me. That makes you mine, Clara, completely." My breath caught as he pulled me against him again, firm and unyielding. His lips brushed my jaw, not quite a kiss, just a reminder, a warning. "Tell me you don't want me," he whispered into my skin. "Tell me and I'll stop." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because my body was screaming for him, and I hated it. He chuckled darkly, his teeth grazing my collarbone. My fingers gripped the front of his shirt before I even realized it. That was the moment I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I was slipping, falling, and he knew exactly how to catch me on the way down. "You're weak," he murmured, his hand sliding to my hips. "A spoiled little girl who doesn't know what she wants. You're cruel," I breathed, trying to sound strong, but I was already leaning into him. "And you like it," he replied, his fingers tracing the curve of my waist. He was right. That was the worst part. He was dangerous, not because he could hurt me, but because I wanted him to, because somewhere between the fear and the fire, I had started to crave him. Then a sudden noise broke the moment, the sharp, insistent ring of a phone on the bedside table. Justin cursed and stepped away, snatching the phone and answering it with venom in his voice. "What is it?" I stood frozen, my heartbeat still hammering as he listened, his jaw tightening with every word. Then he hung up, eyes locked on mine. "Your father," he said coldly, "he wants you back. Claims the contract wasn't fulfilled. He's trying to take you from me." My stomach turned to ice. "Go back to him, to that house of rules and shame." Before I could speak, Justin crossed the room and grabbed my wrist. "We're going to town now. You're coming with me." But I tried to protest. He leaned down, his breath hot against my ear. "You're not going anywhere, not without me." In that moment, I realized I wasn't just trapped in his house, I was trapped in him. And something told me He was trapped in me too. The car cut through the road like a blade, black and gleaming. A mechanical beast that roared beneath us. I sat in the back seat. The silence between us stretching like wire pulled too tight. Justin's grip on the steering wheel was iron, his knuckles pale, his jaw tense. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His whole body pulsed with fury, with control. With something darker that throbbed beneath the surface, something I was beginning to recognize in myself. I'd changed out of the robe. A maid had handed me a simple dress moments before he dragged me out the front door. There was no ceremony, no time to think. He pulled me behind him like a possession, as if afraid someone would steal me if he didn't keep touching me. His silence wasn't cold, it was electric, heavy with thoughts he wouldn't speak aloud. What does he want? I asked, my voice the first to break the quiet. It felt like throwing a pebble into a storm. Justin didn't answer immediately. He glanced at me through the rearview mirror, just for a second. But it was enough to steal my breath. Money, he said at last, his voice soaked in contempt. He thinks he can renegotiate. Like your damaged goods, like you can be returned. I stared at him, the words cutting deeper than I expected. Like I'm merchandise, I whispered. His eyes flicked toward me again, longer this time. You're not, but that's what you bought, isn't it? I said, hating how small my voice sounded. A bargain, a body, something you could own. The car jerked to a halt, tires screaming against the asphalt. My body jolted forward. Caught only by the seatbelt, he turned in his seat slowly, deliberately. His entire frame shifted, facing me like I was something wild and dangerous. I didn't buy something, he growled, his voice low and tight. I bought you, and you're mine. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The air was thick with tension, humming with something unspoken. Then, without warning, he got out of the car and yanked my door open. Before I could react, his hand was round my wrist, pulling me into the open. We were on a deserted street, caught between nowhere and somewhere. The wind pressed my dress against my legs, but the heat in his touch burned hotter than the sun. He pushed me against the hood of the car hard enough to steal my breath, but not enough to hurt me. His hands pinned my wrists down, his body hovering inches from mine. His eyes were fire, raw, possessive. You think I brought you here to talk? He hissed. To negotiate? I didn't bring you here for him. I brought you here to remind me of what? I spat, trying to sound defiant, but my voice trembled. His breath was on my lips now. That you belong to me. I took you, Clara. You're mine, my wife, my woman. No one else gets to touch you, not even in memory. I didn't ask for this, I whispered, tears stinging the back of my eyes. I never asked for any of it. He laughed, then a broken, hollow sound that didn't match the smirk on his face. No, but you responded to it. You opened yourself to me. You let me in. Don't pretend you didn't feel it. He was right. That was the worst part. As much as I wanted to scream, to fight, my mind kept going back to the way I had trembled beneath him, to the way my body had begged for more even when my heart was shattered. I hated it. I hated that he could read it in my silence. He stepped back suddenly, breathing hard, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to scrub away the storm in his skull. His expression changed, not softer, just less guarded, more human. Why? Are you still like this? He asked, voice rough, even after all of it? Untouched. I blinked. What do you mean? You're still innocent, he said, staring at me. Not just in your body, in your mind, in the way you look at me. Like you don't understand what you're doing to me. Something cracked inside me then. A sliver of truth slipped into the light. He hadn't just wanted to break me. He had expected to. He thought I was like the others, girls who knew how to play his game, how to flirt, manipulate, seduce, but I didn't know those rules. I wasn't playing at all. I'm not what you think, I said, standing straighter. I never wanted this power over you. He stepped forward again, and this time he didn't pull me into him. He just looked, really looked. No, he murmured, you're more, much more. His voice cracked, barely audible over the wind, and then he pulled me into his arms with an urgency that wasn't hunger this time. It was fear, it was need. His lips met mine not with force, but with hesitation, with the kind of vulnerability that made my chest tighten. He kissed me like he didn't know how to stop anymore. When he finally pulled back, I saw it, the fear in his eyes, the unraveling of a man who had always been in control. Have you ever been with anyone before me? He asked, his voice raw. No, I said softly, watching the muscle in his jaw twitch. Good. He breathed like it was a prayer, because I can't stand the thought, jealousy. Not of a man but of an idea. He wanted me in ways I didn't yet understand, not just to possess, to keep. Like I was the only thing tethering him to something real. Come on, he said, pulling me back toward the car. Your father is about to find out he doesn't own you anymore. But as we drove toward the city, something shifted. The lines between captor and captive blurred. The heat between us wasn't just desire, it was danger. And I could feel it pulling us both into a place we couldn't come back from. The city swallowed us in steel and glass. towering buildings casting long shadows over our car as we weaved through traffic. But inside, the silence was louder than the street noise outside. Justin's hand stayed on the wheel, firm, knuckles still white. But his mind was somewhere else, somewhere behind his eyes that refused to blink. I sat beside him, barely breathing, watching the way his jaw clenched tighter every time we slowed at a light. He hadn't spoken since we left the highway. He didn't have to. The tension rolling off him was thick enough to taste. I didn't know what I was walking into. My father's face flashed in my mind. The last time I'd seen him, he was broken but still dangerous. Even when he looked defeated, he was always calculating, always angling. And now he was trying to undo a deal that had already been made. Not for my sake, for his. When we pulled up outside the building, I stared up at the glass walls reflecting the gray sky. It didn't feel like salvation. It felt like a battleground. A war between two men, and I was the land they were fighting over. Justin stepped out first, circling to open my door, but it wasn't chivalry, it was control. His hand wrapped around mine as he pulled me out, firm and unrelenting, like I might try to run, but I couldn't, because despite everything, part of me didn't want to. We walked through the lobby, our footsteps echoing on the polished floor. People turned their heads as we passed, whispers trailing behind us like a breeze of speculation. They didn't know who I was, but they knew him, Justin Blackwood. The man who walked like he owned every room he entered, and maybe he did until now. The elevator ride felt eternal. I stood beside him, our arms brushing every time the car shifted. His body radiated heat. His fingers twitched at his side like he wanted to grab me again, to remind me who I belonged to. I didn't look at him. I couldn't, because part of me wanted him to. The doors opened to a conference room, glass walls, steel chairs, and the cold echo of power. My father stood at the end of the table. He looked smaller. Then I remembered, thinner. His eyes were red-rimmed, but his spine was straight, voice ready. I saw it all in a glance. He wasn't here to rescue me. He was here to reclaim me. Clara, he said, stepping forward, a forced warmth in his tone. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. But before I could speak, Justin moved like lightning. He pulled me to his side, his arm firm around my waist, possessive, claiming. His voice cut through the room like a blade. You've lost, Valenti. She's mine. The contract was signed. You don't get to change the rules just because you're losing. My father faltered, just slightly. His eyes moved to me, searching. Clara, sweetheart, you're not safe with him. I know what kind of man he is. You were coerced. I can fix this. I opened my mouth, but I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. And then Justin's fingers tightened around my hip, grounding me, reminding me where I stood, who I stood beside. She already chose. Justin snapped. Get out before I destroy what's left of you. The door slammed behind my father's retreating figure, and just like that, it was over. Justin released me slowly, but his eyes never left mine. They were wild, ferocious, protective. But there was something else beneath them now, something softer, something that scared me more than his fury. He won't touch you again, he said quietly. No one will. I stepped back, my voice suddenly sharp. And you touch me whenever you want. Is that any better? He froze. The shift was instant. His jaw tightened, his gaze darkened again, but he didn't lunge. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he stepped forward, pinning me with just his presence, his body towering over mine. I touch you, he said, because I can. His hands braced on either side of me, against the cold surface of the table, trapping me without chains. His breath hit my cheek. Because you let me, do I whispered, challenging him. The words fell out before I could stop them. He laughed, rough, dangerous. You want to play? Little girl. His lips brushed my ear. Careful, I play to win. And then he did something he hadn't done before. He touched me without taking. His fingers slid up my arm, slow and deliberate. They curled around my neck, not to control, but to cradle. His thumbs traced the edge of my lips like he was memorizing them. I shivered. Not from fear, from anticipation. You don't know what you do to me, he whispered. I try not to care, but you. He stopped, biting back the rest. What do I do? I asked. Breathless, he pulled me against him hard, and for a moment, I thought he would devour me again. But instead, he lifted me onto the edge of the table with terrifying gentleness. His hand slid up my thighs, my breath caught. I want to protect you, he said. Destroy you, have you until you forget who you are. His voice broke, and just like that, he stepped back. Hands clenched at his sides, breathing hard. I can't, he muttered. Not here, not like this. Why not? I asked, dazed. His eyes met mine, wild and lost. Because I'm losing myself in you. And I don't know how to stop. The drive back to the mansion was a blur. The city lights passed like ghosts on glass, flickering across the windows, but inside the car, neither of us moved. Justin's hand stayed tighter on the steering wheel, but his thoughts were miles away. I could feel it, how rigid his body was, how trapped his mind had become, not with anger, not even with control, but with something worse, something he didn't have a name for. His silence wasn't commanding anymore, it was haunted. When we arrived, he didn't wait for me to follow. He stormed ahead, his footsteps loud across the marble foyer. His jacket tossed aside like it weighed too much to carry. I stood by the door for a moment, unsure if I should go after him, but my heart moved before my feet did. Upstairs, I found him in the bedroom, hands braced on the windowsill, his breath fogging the glass, shoulders trembling with something I hadn't seen before. Out, go, he said without looking at me. Sleep in another room. The word struck like a slap. I can't, I said, stepping forward. You said I was yours. He turned slowly, eyes blazing with emotion I couldn't name. Because I'll hurt you, he snapped, the words cracking in his throat. I don't know who I am around you anymore, Clara. You've destroyed me. I should have left then. I should have closed the door, walked away, protected what was left of me. But I didn't. Instead, I walked toward him step by step until I was close enough to touch. And I did. I reached up and cupped his face in my hands. He froze like my touch shocked him. Like he didn't believe he was allowed to be touched like that. You won't hurt me, I whispered. You can't. He grabbed my wrists, pulling me against him, but there was no force this time. Just desperation. You don't understand, he said, voice shaking. I want you too much. And if I lose you, I won't survive it. His words cracked open something inside me, something tender, something terrifying. I looked into the eyes of the man who had once claimed me like a prize and now knelt before me, like I was salvation. The man who had broken me open and in doing so had broken himself. Then, the moment shattered. The shrill ring of his phone tore through the room like a blade. Justin cursed under his breath and pulled it from his pocket, answering with a growl. What? He snapped. I watched the color drain from his face, watched his fingers tense around the phone. And when he hung up, his eyes met mine, and for the first time since the wedding, I saw fear in him. Your father, he said, voice trembling, he hired lawyers, claims you were coerced. They're coming to take you. The room spun. My chest tightened as the world I thought I had escaped suddenly clawed its way back. My old life, the cage, the silence, the obedience threatened to reclaim me. Before I could even process it, Justin dropped to his knees in front of me. His hands clutched my waist, like I was the only thing keeping him from falling apart completely. Don't go, he begged, his voice broke. I can't live without you, Clara. The man who had ravaged me on our wedding night, who had marked me in every way a man could, now knelt at my feet, like a boy afraid of losing the only thing he didn't know how to deserve. I stared at him, stunned, and I realized something in that moment. He was mine now, too. I won't go, I said, kneeling to meet him. But you have to want me for real, not as a possession, as I am. He pulled me into him then, his arms crushing me to his chest. I could feel the tremble in his grip, the way he buried his face in my neck like I was home. I want you, he murmured. Anyway you'll let me, just don't leave. I held him tighter, letting the weight of his words settle over my heart, and then I heard it, the sound of tires crunching on gravel outside. They were here. Lawyers, or worse. Justin stood suddenly, his eyes sharpening like steel again. But before he could move, I grabbed his hand. Let me talk to them, I said, calm, steady, let me decide. He stared at me, stunned, then nodded. His fingers laced through mine. Prove it, he whispered, and I knew what he meant. I pulled him down to me, kissed him with everything I had, more than desire, more than fear. It was a promise that, whatever came next, I wasn't his prisoner anymore. I was his equal, and I was staying by choice. The knock at the door was no longer a sound, it was a threat. A reminder that the past wasn't finished with me yet. I stood in the middle of the grand hallway, the cold marble beneath my bare feet, my fingers still woven tightly through Justin's. He hadn't let go since I'd kissed him. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe if he did, he'd come undone completely. Behind us, the walls of the mansion stood like frozen guards, watching, listening, judging. Outside, the world was waiting to rip us apart. He looked at me again, no commands, no fury, just fear unspoken and fragile in a man who had only ever known how to take, not to lose. His voice was barely a breath. Clara, are you sure? I nodded slowly, my heart hammering in my chest, my pulse racing, but my mind clearer than it had ever been. I'm not that girl anymore, I whispered. And I'm not going to let them decide who I belong to. Together, we stepped outside. The garden glistened with early morning dew. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the low murmur of voices near the iron gates. Two men in tailored suits stood with briefcases and cold eyes, speaking to the guards, and behind them, my father's car, parked like a curse on wheels. The lawyers straightened when they saw us, already flipping through papers, one of them lifting a hand in greeting. Miss Valenti, the older one said, we're here to discuss the annulment proceedings. Your father has expressed serious concern. She's not Miss Valenti, Justin snapped. stepping in front of me like a shield. "She's my wife, speak carefully," but I touched his arm gently and stepped past him. For the first time, I didn't need his protection. I didn't need to hide behind the strength of the man who once scared me, because now I could stand on my own. "I'm not being coerced," I said clearly. "I'm not being held. I married him and I'm staying. You can tell my father to stop sending threats in suits." They hesitated, their eyes narrowed. "You're certain?" one asked, doubt clear in his tone. "Because if you were forced, I wasn't," I cut in. "What happened between us?" I glanced at Justin, whose chest rose and fell like a man holding back a storm. Was complicated, but I made my choice. The lawyers exchanged glances, their confidence fraying. The older one cleared his throat, closed the folder in his hand, and gave me a small nod. "Very well, we'll notify Mr. Valenti." They turned to leave. But I wasn't finished. "Tell him," I called after them, "that I'm not returning, ever. Tell him I've finally made a decision for myself." The gates closed behind them. The mansion doors shut, and just like that, the outside world fell away. I turned to Justin, expecting relief, gratitude, maybe even pride. But what I saw in his face stopped me cold. Tears. They hadn't fallen yet, but they were there. Brimming, held back by a man who had never known how to cry, his mouth open like he wanted to speak but he couldn't. He dropped to his knees before me again, just like before. But this time, it wasn't desperation that drove him, it was awe. "You chose me," he whispered. "Even after everything I chose us," I said softly, "but only if we do this differently." He nodded, his hand sliding up my thighs, his eyes worshipping me like I was the only thing that mattered. "I'll give you everything. Anything, just don't go." I cupped his face again, brushing a thumb over the stubble on his jaw. "I'm not leaving, but I'm not yours like I was. I'm not something to be owned." He nodded again, this time fiercely. "You're not mine." I blinked. "You're you," he continued, "and that terrifies me because I love you, Clara. I love you in a way I've never loved anything." The words spilled out of him like a dam breaking. And when I kissed him, it wasn't to silence him, it was to say it back, without saying a word. He picked me up like I weighed nothing and carried me back inside. But it wasn't like before. There was no dominance in his grip, no demand in his breath. Just reverence. That night, we didn't make love like enemies, or like strangers tangled in pain. We made love like to people who had walked through fire to find each other, and this time, when he whispered my name, it wasn't a claim, it was a prayer. The morning after was quieter than the ones before it. There were no footsteps echoing down the halls, no orders barked into phones. Just the warmth of Justin's arms around me and the soft sound of his heartbeat against my back. I lay there in silence, not because I was afraid but because I was thinking about who I was, who I had become, and what I would no longer tolerate. He stirred behind me. I felt his breath brush against my shoulder as he whispered, "Are you still here?" I turned toward him, smiling faintly. "I'm not going anywhere." He kissed my forehead like the words still didn't feel real in his chest, as if he didn't yet believe that someone could stay willingly, that someone could love him voluntarily, not by force, not through fear. We spent the morning in a strange kind of stillness. Every room felt different, lighter, as though the house, this cold mansion of stone and silence, was finally breathing too. I sat by the window while he poured me coffee, and we didn't say much. But the way he watched me, as if every movement I made was sacred, told me everything I needed to know. But peace never lingers too long in a story like ours. By afternoon, a phone call shattered the quiet. Justin took it in the hall, and I watched from the staircase as his face twisted with restrained fury. His voice was low, sharp, and final. When he hung up, he didn't speak right away. He just stood there, staring at the door as if it had already betrayed him. I came down the stairs slowly, each step pulling me closer to a truth I could feel forming in the space between us. "What happened?" I asked. He turned toward me. The fire in his eyes hadn't dimmed, but now there was something else behind it. Pain, regret, fear of what he couldn't control. "He's waiting," he said simply, "in a conference room downtown. Your father." I nodded, expecting that. "He still thinks he can convince you to come back." "He can't," I said without hesitation. Justin looked at me for a long moment, then handed me my coat. "I know," he replied, "but you need to tell him." This time, he didn't leave me. He walked beside me. We drove without touching, without words. Not because we were angry, but because we were ready. The city loomed ahead again, familiar now in a way I hadn't expected. We parked in front of a skyscraper that gleamed like a blade in the winter light. Justin didn't open my door. He didn't pull me from my seat. I opened it myself. Inside, the same cold elevators hummed upward, and I stood still, watching my reflection in the mirrored walls. I didn't look like her anymore. The girl who had once stared at her reflection in a wedding dress she didn't choose. Now, I was wearing black, sharp lines, clean edges, and my eyes didn't flinch. The doors opened. My father stood at the End of the room, pacing. When he saw me, he stopped. Clara, he said. Relief pouring out of him like oil. Thank God. I knew you'd come to your senses. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't come to return. I said, I came to end this. He blinked, confused, angry. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. I interrupted. You sold me like an object, like leverage, and now you want to pretend it was for my own good? You were protected. I was trapped, I said, voice rising, by you and by him, but only one of you has tried to make it right. My father's gaze shifted to Justin, who stood quietly to the side. His hands were in his pockets. He wasn't dominating the room. He wasn't trying to own the moment. He was letting me have it. Clara, my father said, his voice shaking now. You don't have to stay with him. We can fix this. I stepped closer. I'm not staying with him. I said, I'm choosing him. His expression cracked. Years of control slipping away in a single breath. You don't get to decide for me anymore. Justin stepped forward, only slightly, but it was enough. My father took a step back. She's mine now, Justin said quietly. But more importantly, she's hers, and that's what you can't stand. I looked at the man who raised me, who once told me love was obedience. You taught me to be silent, I said, but I found my voice anyway. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream, and then my father turned. He didn't argue, he didn't cry. He just left defeated, broken, and alone. The moment the door closed, I exhaled. Justin turned to me. Not with triumph but with reverence. You touched me whenever you wanted, I said suddenly, boldly. But now I need to know, do you touch me because I let you, or because you still think you can? He stepped forward, slowly. I touch you, he said, because you invite me. Because your silence never meant surrender, and now that I know that, his hand found my waist, gentle, waiting. I won't touch you unless you reach for me first. I pulled him in, not because he asked, but because I wanted to. We didn't speak as we walked out of that glass tower. The wind tugged at my coat. My heels clicked sharply against the polished floors, but inside, I was silent and so was he. Yet the silence wasn't cold, it was thick with tension. The kind that doesn't come from distance but from something unspoken pressing against the ribs. Begging to be let out, he opened the car door for me, and for once, I didn't hesitate. I slipped inside without waiting for a cue. He took the driver's seat beside me, his knuckles tighter on the wheel again, like he was holding onto the last threads of a storm. But now, I wasn't afraid of his storms. I was becoming one myself. The drive was short, but the silence stretched long. His breathing was controlled, almost forced. I could tell something in him was unraveling. Not violently, but slowly, like fabric being pulled apart, one fragile thread at a time. When we reached the mansion, he didn't speak. He walked ahead, like he always did, but this time, I didn't follow. I waited, just to see if he'd look back. He did. He waited. And when I finally entered the room, I didn't go to him. I went to the center of it, the still air, the place where everything could be seen. He stood by the window, shadows crawling up the wall beside him. His jacket was gone. His hands were trembling slightly, barely, but I noticed. He turned when he heard me step forward. You've changed, he said. So have you. He didn't argue, he just watched. Earlier in that room, I said softly, you let me speak. I had to, he murmured. I don't own you anymore, and that terrifies me. I stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, every movement a statement. Why, he swallowed, because I've never needed someone the way I need you. And I don't know how to survive needing something I can't control. That was it. His confession. Raw and undone, and I felt it, how the power had shifted. How? The man who once pulled me into darkness now stood at the edge of it himself, waiting for me to bring him back. I stepped even closer. His eyes locked on me, wild and unreadable. I raised my hand and brushed my fingers across his jaw, just a featherlight touch, and watched him shudder like I had touched something sacred. You told me once that I didn't know what I was doing. To you, I whispered. What if I do now? He inhaled sharply. What if I want to test how far you'll bend before you break? His lips parted, but no sound came out. I saw it, the war in his eyes. The part of him that still wanted control, and the part that had already surrendered it. I leaned in, close enough to kiss him, but didn't. Single quotes. Instead, I whispered at the edge of his mouth, careful. Justin. I play to win, too. Then I stepped back. Just one step, and it was enough to make him unravel. He reached for me like a man falling from a cliff, but stopped himself at the last second. His fingers curling into fists at his sides. You're driving me mad, he said, his voice hoarse. Do you know that? I nodded slowly. Do you want me to stop? He didn't answer because we both knew the truth. I walked past him and sat on the edge of the long oak table in the center of the room. I crossed my legs, watching him from above. He stood frozen, his chest rising and falling like every breath cost him more than the last thought. And then I said the words that broke him. Touch me if you dare. It wasn't a plea. It was a command, a dare. A challenge laced with the very poison he used to control me. He crossed the room in 3 steps. But when his hands reached for me, they didn't grab, they hesitated, they hovered trembling. Reverent. He touched my arm first, just to make sure I wouldn't pull away. When I didn't, his fingers slid up, over my shoulder, to my neck, then to my jaw. He held my face like I was the only real thing left in a world that was slipping from him. His lips hovered over mine, and he whispered, "You don't know what you've done to me." "Then show me," I said, but he didn't kiss me. He pulled back, and I saw it again, the fracture. The line where his power ended and mine began. He was trembling. "I can't," he breathed, "not here. Not now. If I touch you again, I'll never stop." "Why not?" I asked softly. He turned away from me, rubbing his hands over his face like he couldn't breathe. "Because I'm lost in you, Clara," he said, "and I don't know how to come back." The next morning, everything felt louder, the birds outside, the ticking of the hallway clock, even my breath, but the silence between Justin and me had changed. It wasn't made of tension anymore. It was made of weight, the kind that comes after truths have been spoken but not yet lived through. He sat at the end of the bed, shirtless, elbows resting on his knees, head bowed like a man praying to something he didn't believe in. I sat up slowly, watching him. The strength in his back wasn't in his muscles. It was in the way he hadn't run, the way he stayed even after his control shattered. The way he let me see him bare, not just in body, but in soul. "You didn't sleep," I said. He turned his head slightly. "Didn't want to close my eyes. Didn't want to miss a second with you." I smiled softly, but it faded as the doorbell echoed through the house like a gunshot. Justin stood instantly, his eyes sharpening, his fists clenched like reflex. I slid out of bed behind him, already reaching for my robe. "Don't," he said. "I'll handle it." "No," I replied. "We will." The lawyers were at the door again, this time flanked by 2 men in uniform. The pressure was different now. Not legal, not symbolic. Real. The world outside was trying again, trying to split us open. To drag me back into the version of life that had always belonged to someone else. We received an injunction. One of them began, due to the concerns raised by her father and new claims of manipulation, coercion. "She's not going anywhere," Justin snapped. "Actually," I interrupted, stepping forward, "I'll speak for myself." The men turned. They weren't expecting me. "I'm not under duress," I said clearly. "I'm not being held. I'm not confused. I'm not broken. I'm not yours, not my father's, not the law's. I chose to stay with Justin, and if you can't respect that, then I suggest you get off our property." One of them opened his mouth to protest, but I didn't give him the chance. "I was sold once," I said. "Not again, not now, not ever." Their eyes flicked to Justin, who stood behind me like a shadow, not in front, not shielding. "Just present, with me, for me." The lead officer sighed. "We'll file your statement. If you're ever in danger, I'm in danger when people don't listen to women who speak." And that was it. They left, the door closed, and I turned around straight into Justin's arms. He didn't kiss me, he didn't say a word. He just held me like the whole world had tried to take me and failed. Like he was still afraid I'd disappear. I pulled back and looked him in the eyes. "I chose you," he nodded. "I believed I was strong enough to survive you," I continued. "Now I realize I'm strong enough to love you." His hands framed my face, his forehead pressed to mine. "I don't deserve you, maybe not," I said, "but you've become someone who wants to." He kissed me slow and quiet. No fire, no war, just devotion. Later that day, we stood in the garden, hand in hand, where the wind tangled through the roses like breath. I leaned into him and he wrapped his arms around me, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Do you still feel like you own me?" I asked. He exhaled into my neck. "No, what do I feel like now?" He pulled me closer, voice barely a whisper. "Everything," and I knew then, no matter what came next. No matter who tried to rewrite our story, I wasn't the girl sold for dead anymore. I was the woman who chose her future. And the man who once claimed me like a trophy now held me like a prayer. The days that followed passed like breath in the dark, quiet, steady, real. The mansion no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a space in between what we'd endured and what we were still becoming. The shadows on the walls weren't as heavy. The silence between us didn't carry teeth. We weren't navigating war anymore. We were learning how to speak, how to touch without taking, how to stay without gripping too tight. Justin changed in ways I never expected. He stopped leading with control. He started asking, looking, listening, and I, who once waited for permission to exist, now walked through rooms like I owned them, not because he gave me power, because I had finally taken it back. One night, I found him in the library, shirt unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up, eyes lost in a book he hadn't touched in hours. He was staring at the fireplace, the flames flickering across his face like they were trying to warm something that had long gone cold. I sat down beside him and waited. "I never thought I'd be this man," he said quietly, not looking at me. "I never believed I could be more than what I was." "And what were you?" He swallowed hard. A collector of beautiful things I didn't know how to keep. I reached for his hand. Interlaced our fingers. You didn't keep me, I stayed. He looked at me then and something in him broke open, not painfully, just honestly. Every night I touched you, he said, voice raw, I thought it made you mine. But the truth is, I was becoming yours. Every kiss, every fight, every breath you gave me when I didn't deserve it. Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I leaned in, kissed his forehead, and whispered, then stop trying to own me. Let's belong to each other, or not at all, he nodded. As if those were the words he'd been waiting his whole life to hear. Later, as the wind howled outside and rain painted the windows, he pulled me into bed not like a man desperate for control, but like someone afraid to wake up without me there. His hands moved over me with reverence, not hunger. His kisses were soft not because he lacked desire, but because he finally understood the weight of what it meant to be wanted back. When he whispered, I love you against my skin, it wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a leash, it was a vow. And when I whispered it back, it wasn't surrender. It was freedom. In the months that followed, my father never reached out again. The house he once ruled was sold off, and the name that once held me hostage meant nothing anymore. I didn't return to the past to close it. I simply walked forward until it no longer followed me. Justin built me a greenhouse on the west wing of the mansion. Said it reminded him of me, wild things growing in places that once held only glass and stone. And every morning, I'd walk out barefoot into that space and remember, this is what I chose. Not him, us, not for survival, for love. He still gets that look sometimes, like he can't believe I'm real, like if he blinks, I'll vanish. And I still tease him for it, but the truth is, I look at him the same way. Because once upon a time, we were ruins, now we're a home. The world thinks stories like ours shouldn't end in love. But maybe they don't know what love really is. Love isn't soft, it isn't easy, it's not born in safety, sometimes it's forged in fire, sometimes it's carved out of darkness, and sometimes it's the hands that once shattered you learning how to hold you without harm. He used to say I'd never be free again. But now he knows I was never his to cage, I chose to stay. And in the end, he was the one who couldn't live without me.